Hi, everybody. Dr. Lynch here. I am back with the Land of Stories to read our next chapter, Chapter 5, From the Mouth of a Frog. If you remember at the very end of the last chapter, she falls through the book. Ooh, what? That's crazy. So now we're going to read on. Alex was no longer in her bedroom. She was falling into a world of light. She fell farther and farther, faster and faster. She was dizzy and scared. She screamed out for help, but she couldn't hear her own voice. Was she ever going to stop falling? Was she going to die? Was she dead? She wondered if she would ever see her family again. She could hear birds chirping and trees blowing in the wind. The noise seemed to get closer and closer, but she just kept falling and falling, not knowing where she was falling to. Ouch! Alex said, hitting the ground. Her impact was hard enough to hurt, but not hard enough to seriously injure her. Had it not been for the rough landing, she would have thought she was dreaming for sure. Alex quickly got to her feet. She felt her pulse to make sure her heart was still working. She was still alive from what she could tell. She was so thankful to have finally stopped falling. But where exactly had she fallen to? She was standing on a dirt path in the middle of a thick forest. The trees were tall and dark with bright green moss covering their trunks. The sun's rays shined through a light mist. Birds squawked from high in the trees, and if she listened closely enough, she could hear a tiny stream in the distance. Can you almost see it? It sounds beautiful, doesn't it? Big, tall trees with green moss, and you can hear a babbling brook and birds, and there's like light coming through. You know how that looks like sometimes maybe early in the morning when you can see it, it looks kind of like a ray of light that comes into your window that's shining through into the trees like that. Alex spun around looking in all directions. Her breathing increased as she took in her new surroundings. Was she overreacting or not reacting enough to what had just happened? And what exactly had just happened? She looked up to see if there was an opening she had fallen through, hoping to see some sort of window into her bedroom. But all she saw were tree branches in the sky above her. Where am I? She asked herself. Ah! As if he had fallen right out of thin air, Connor landed hard on the ground beside his sister. He was pale and screaming, and his limbs were stretched out in all directions. Am I alive? Am I dying? Am I dead? He asked from the ground with his eyes tightly closed. You're alive, Alex told him. She had never been so happy to see him. Alex, is that you? Connor asked. He slowly opened his eyes one at a time and looked around. Where are we? He asked as she helped him to his feet. It looks like some kind of forest, she said. It was unlike any forest they had ever seen in real life, at least. The colors were so vivid and the air was so crisp, and it was as if they had fallen into a painting. A painting Alex was positive she had seen before. Look, Connor said, pointing to the ground. All our pencils. The path was littered with pencils Alex had been dropping into the book all week. She also found her school bag and a few of her dirty socks in the middle of the mess. But where were all the books she had dropped into the land of stories? So this is where they all went, Alex said. Where is here? Connor asked. How far away from home are we? Alex couldn't answer him. She was starting to become just as worried as he was. They were worse than lost. This is your fault, Alex, he said. My fault, Alex yelled. We wouldn't be here if you had just knocked on my door instead of barging in like the house was on fire. I knew you were planning this, Connor said. I had to stop you. I wasn't planning on going into the book. I was just testing it out, Alex explained. You didn't have to follow me in here. Oh, sure. Yeah, was I supposed to just leave you in the book by yourself? He exclaimed. Was I supposed to just tell Mom when she got home? Oh, hi, Mom. Hope you had a good day at work. Alex fell through the book. By the way, what's for dinner? Give me a break. Connor began jumping upwards as high as he could. What are you doing? Alex asked. We fell from somewhere up here. There's got to be a way back, he said, but all his jumping was pointless. Connor eventually tired himself out and he took a seat on the ground against the tree trunk. What if we were transported to another country or something? Connor asked. His forehead became more and more wrinkled the further he thought about it. What if it took us to Canada or Mongolia or somewhere? How long is it going to take for Mom or someone to find us? Suddenly, the ground started shaking. A powerful rumbling consumed the forest. The branches of trees shook, and the small rocks on the ground began jumping as something massive moved closer to them. What's happening now? Connor yelled. Let's take cover, Alex said, and she grabbed her bag, and the twins ran off the path and into the forest a little way, and they took refuge between a particularly wide tree. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. A huge cavalcade of soldiers in white horses rode past them. Their armor was clean and shiny. They carried green and silver shields with large red apples painted on them, and they waved flags with the same design. Alex, did we go back in time? Connor anxiously asked his sister. This looks like something right out of medieval times. The pencils were all obliterated under the horses' hooves. The soldiers were moving at such a fast and forceful pace that none of them noticed the awestruck twins peeking out from behind the tree. Alex was fixated on their shields. The red apple was such an odd thing to be displayed on a shield, but there was something so familiar about it. She couldn't put her finger on it. The rumbling slowly faded away as the soldiers disappeared down the dirt path. The twins both stayed behind the tree for a few moments, making sure the coast was clear. I don't know about you, but I've had about as much excitement as I can handle for one day, Connor told Alex. A poster pinned to a nearby tree caught Alex's eye. She walked over to it and pulled it off the tree for further inspection. It was old, with faded writing and a picture of a disgruntled-looking little girl with curly blonde hair. And the poster read, Wanted, dead or alive, Goldilocks, for burglary, thievery, and running from the law. Alex's face went white, and she stopped breathing for a moment. She had realized where they were. No wonder the trees had been so recognizable. She had seen pictures of them so many times growing up. The book had taken them to the exact place she had hoped. Is it possible? She asked herself. The wheels in her head had never spun so fast as they were now. Is what possible? Connor asked. Do you know where we are? I think so, Alex told him. Where? Connor asked, fearing the answer. Connor, we went into the book, she exclaimed. But he wasn't following her. I think we are actually in the land of stories. She handed him the wanted poster and he read it, and his eyes grew as wide as a lemur's. No, 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 no. This can't be happening. This is crazy, he said, shaking his head. He handed the poster back to his sister as if it were infected with rabies. He couldn't believe what she was saying. He didn't want to believe what she was saying. Are you telling me we are in a fairy tale world? Oh, I'd recognize this forest anywhere. It's straight out of Grandma's book, Alex said in an unplanned smile. But it makes perfect sense. Where else would it have taken us? We just fell through a book. Nothing makes sense, Connor said. So are we stuck here or what? How do we get home? I don't have all of your answers, Connor, Alex said. Don't forget, this just happened to me too. Connor began pacing around the tree with his hands on his hips. I can't believe I ditched detention and wound up in another dimension, he said. Alex was rather grateful her brother had come after her. They had lived together all their lives and had been in the same classroom since kindergarten. She didn't know if she could handle being in a different dimension all by herself. I hope you're happy, Alex, Connor said. Told you we should have thrown that book in the creek. Enough with the blaming, Alex said. It doesn't matter how we got here. The point is that we're here now. What matters is finding someone who can help us get home. Excuse me, may I help you? Said a proper voice behind the twins. They jolted at the sound of another voice besides their own. They turned around to see who it had come from, and once they saw, they both wished they hadn't. Standing behind Alex and Connor was what could best be described as a frogman. He was tall, with a wide face, big glossy eyes, and shiny green skin. He wore a dapper three-piece suit and carried a large jar of lily pads. Forgive me for eavesdropping, but I'm rather good with directions if you need some, he said with a very wide smile. Alex and Connor were so petrified that they were paralyzed. If they needed any more evidence that they were in a fairy tale world, this was their proof. You look awfully young to be in the forest by yourself, the frogman said. Are you lost? Connor let out a high-pitched squeal that lasted much longer than it should have. Please don't eat us, he said, and he dropped to the ground in a fetal position. The frogman looked down at him with a frown. Young man, I have no intention of eating you, he said. Is he always like this? The frogman asked Alex. Alex responded with a squeal almost identical to the one her brother had made. I know, don't worry. I'm used to people screaming at me, the frogman told them. Get it out of your system. The shock will only last a minute. We're sorry, Alex finally managed to say. It's just that where we're from, there aren't many frog people. I mean, I'm sorry if that isn't the politically correct term for what you are. Connor let out another high-pitched noise. It wasn't a scream this time, but it was embarrassing, nonetheless. The frogman studied their faces and paid special attention to their clothes. Where exactly are you from? Pretty far from here, Alex said. A piercing set of wolf howls echoed in the forest. All three of them jumped at the sound. The frogman looked around the trees with fear in his big glossy eyes. It's getting dark, the frogman said. We better get inside. Please, come on, follow me. It's just a few minutes' walk from here. Nice try, Connor said. The wolf howls echoed again. This time they were much louder than the first. Wherever the wolves were, they were getting closer. I know I look scary now, the frogman said to the twins, but I'm nothing compared to some of the creatures that lurk in the woods after night. I promise I will not harm you. There was such concern in his eyes, it was hard not to trust him. The frogman took off at a brisk walk deep into the forest. Alex nudged Connor. We better follow him. Are you crazy? I'm not going home with a giant frog, Connor whispered to her. What do we have to lose? Alex said. Besides our lives, Connor said. But despite his protest, he was dragged up by his sister and pulled into the direction the frogman was leading them. The twins hurried behind the frogman for a good while. They zigzagged between trees and jumped over boulders and tree roots that stuck up from the ground. The deeper they went into the forest, the thicker the trees became. It got dark very quickly, and it was almost pitch black by the time they reached the frogman's home. Alex and Connor stayed close together. With every step, they second-guessed if they had made a smart choice going with this strange creature. This way, he said. The frogman brushed aside some dead vines growing over a large wooden door that was camouflaged in the side of a small hill. He pulled the door open and led the hesitant twins underground. He looked back into the forest, making sure they hadn't been followed, before shutting the door behind him. It was very dark underground. Alex and Connor were so close together that they could have been mistaken for Siamese twins. Forgive the mess. I wasn't expecting company, the frogman apologized, and he lit a lamp with a match. Alex and Connor didn't know what to expect of the frogman's home, but what they were seeing definitely wasn't it. They were in a large room with dirt walls and a low, low dirt ceiling. Roots from the tree growing above them grew down like a chandelier. A cluster of big, cushy chairs and sofas, many of the cushions had stuffing sticking out of them, sat in the center of the room, and they were angled to face a small fireplace. Nearby, teacups and pots hung from hooks over a tiny kitchenette. To Alex's delight, there were books everywhere. Shelves of books lined the dirt walls. Piles of books were stacked on every available surface and on the ground, and it was as if the room was infested with literature. Connor, Alex whispered close to him, look around at this place. It's like we're having our own Lucy and Mr. Tumnus moment. Connor looked around and saw what she meant. If he offers us a Turkish delight, I don't care what you say, we are getting out of here, he whispered back. It's a little dirty, but it is cozy, the frogman said. It's hard to find a landlord who will house a frog, so I did the best I could with what I had. He placed the jar of lily pads on the mantel and immediately started a fire in the fireplace. He filled a tea kettle with warm water from the pitcher and placed it on the fire. Then he took a seat in a big white chair closest to it. He crossed his legs and folded his hands neatly in his lap. He was one proper frog. Please, have a seat, the frogman said, gesturing to the sofa in front of him. The twins reluctantly did as he asked. The sofa was rather lumpy, so they had to shift around in their seats to get comfortable. What are you? Asked Connor. Connor, don't be rude, said his sister, elbowing him in the side. Oh, it's quite all right, the frogman said with a complicated smile. I understand my appearance takes some time to get used to. Even I haven't fully adapted to it yet. You mean you weren't always a, frog person? Alex asked as politely as she could. Heavens, no, the frogman said. I was cursed years ago by a very aggressive witch. Why? Alex asked. She was fascinated by how casually he had said it. To teach me a lesson, I suppose, the frogman told her. I used to be a very vain young man. The witch transformed my appearance so I would lose all of the things that I had taken for granted. His wide smile softly faded. It had obviously been a very long and painful experience for him, and he still had a sad sense of loss and longing about him. The twins had never seen a frog look so sad. I can't even imagine what that must have been like, said Alex, beaming with sympathy. Can we call you Froggy? Connor asked with a small smirk. Connor? Alex reprimanded. It's quite all right. The frogman nodded, and his smile returned. I've learned that the more people embrace their disadvantages, the less disadvantaged they become. Please, call me Froggy. I prefer it. Connor shrugged and smiled. May I get you some lily pad tea? Froggy asked the twins. Both the twins nodded. They didn't want to be rude. Froggy retrieved the tea kettle from the fire, and he hopped, literally, to the kitchenette and poured water into 3 teacups. He opened a jar on the mantel and dropped a lily pad into each teacup and stirred. Do either of you take flies with your tea? He asked, reaching for another jar on his mantel, this one filled with dead flies. No thanks, Connor said. Trying to quit. Suit yourself, Froggy said, and he dropped a few flies into his tea. He handed them each a teacup and reseated himself across from them. They stared down at it for a few moments before deciding that they'd at least pretend to drink it. What are your names? Froggy asked the twins. I'm Alex, and this is my brother Connor. A large and happy smile came to Froggy's face. Are you by chance Alex Bailey? Froggy asked, grinning an ear equivalent to ear equivalent. Yes? Alex was shocked. How did an amphibian know who she was? As in, this book belongs to Alex Bailey? Froggy asked. He leaned over the side of his chair and he pulled up a stack of books, opening one to show where the phrase was written inside. Those are my books, Alex said excitingly, recognizing the books she had dropped into the land of stories. I was wondering what had happened to them. So peculiar, Froggy explained. I was out collecting flies and was walking down the path to the swamp when one just fell out of the sky and landed on my head. I returned the next day and found several more on the same spot. It's the oddest thing that's ever happened to me. You mean besides being turned into a frog, right? Connor asked. Because if I were you, that would be on the top of my list. Ouch! Alex had elbowed her brother. Froggy ignored Connor and went on with his explanation. As you can see from my shelves, I love to collect books, especially when I'm not expecting to, he said. And all these books were unlikely as any as I have ever read. They described people and places I have never seen or heard of. And I thought, oh, this is so odd. The author writes about such interesting places. Could you imagine a world without witches or trolls or giants? What imaginations! Froggy chuckled at the thought of this. The twins laughed along with the best fake laughs they could muster. Oh, please keep them. I have duplicate copies at home, Alex told him, and Froggy was delighted to hear this. Connor cleared his throat. Speaking of home, I don't mean to interrupt this little book club, but we're really lost and would like to know where we are. Froggy's glossy eyes went back and forth between the twins, watching them closely. Oh, children, you wouldn't be here if you knew where you were. Well, you're in the dwarf forest. He had expected to get some sort of worried reaction from the twins, but Alex and Connor just stared at him with very little expression. The dwarf forest? Alex asked. Where are they? You've never heard of them? Froggy asked, completely appalled. The twins both shook their heads. It's a very dangerous place, Froggy told them. It's the only designated area of land without a ruler or government. It's a kingdom where everyone is their own king. It used to be populated by dwarves who were working in the mines, but now it's full of criminals and fugitives mostly. The place where people go when they don't want to be found. Knowing that they had not only traveled into another world, but they were in a dangerous part of that world, did nothing to help the twins' anxiety. Are there other kingdoms? Alex asked. Froggy was stunned. It was as if she was asking him what color the sky was. However, he seemed to be enjoying their unfamiliarity. Of course, he said. There's the Northern Kingdom, the Sleeping Kingdom, the Charming Kingdom, the Corner Kingdom, the Fairy Kingdom, the Red Riding Hood Kingdom, the Elf Empire, the Dwarf Forest, and the Troll and Goblin Territory. How could you possibly not know this? This was difficult to the twins to wrap their heads around. How big was Fairy Tale World? Their puzzled faces inspired Froggy to hop out of his seat and cross over to one of the bookshelves and returned with a large rolled-up scroll. He handed it to the twins and they unrolled it. It was a large, detailed map of the new world they were just in. I'm wondering if it looked a little like this one. What do you think? The Northern Kingdom was the largest of the kingdoms and took up most of the top of the map. The second largest was Charming Kingdom, spread across to the south. And the third largest was Sleeping Kingdom, which stretched along the east. The Dwarf Forest covered the majority of the west. The tiny Corner Kingdom was tucked away in the southwest corner of the continent, and in the northwest corner was Elf Empire. In between the Charming Kingdom and the Sleeping Kingdom was a Fairy Kingdom, and just about above that was the Troll and Goblin Territory. The Fairy Kingdom looked beautiful, as if it was very colorful and seemed to sparkle on the map. The Troll and Goblin Territory looked frightening and appeared to be surrounded by large boulders and rocks, preventing anything from going in or coming out. In the very center of it all was Red Riding Hood Kingdom, circled by an unmistakable brick wall of gigantic proportions. Alex and Connor couldn't believe it. The world they had grown up hearing about was real. It was all real, and it was bigger and better than they could have ever imagined. Alex couldn't help but get emotional, and tears began to flood down her face. Together, all the kingdoms create the Happily Ever After Assembly, Froggy explained. The Happily Ever After Assembly? Connor asked with a slight touch of sarcasm to his voice. It's an organization formed to uphold the treaty of all the rulers, signed so that all the kingdoms could live in peace and prosperity, Froggy told them. Sounds like our United Nations, Alex whispered to Connor. All the kingdoms have their own traditions and celebrated histories, Froggy went on. And there are kings and queens, I'm assuming? Connor asked. Oh, yes, Froggy answered. The Northern Kingdom is ruled by Queen Snow White. The Corner Kingdom is watched over by Queen Rapunzel. The Sleeping Kingdom, formerly known as the Eastern Kingdom, but renamed after that dreadful curse under which it was placed, is governed by Queen Sleeping Beauty. And of course, the Charming Kingdom is ruled by King Charming and his wife, Queen Cinderella. Wait, are these current monarchs? Alex asked with a sparkle of excitement in her eyes. You mean Cinderella, Snow White, and Sleeping Beauty? They're all still alive? Of course they are, Froggy said. Oh my goodness, this is wonderful, Alex said with excitement. Isn't that wonderful, Connor? Yeah, whatever, Connor mumbled. How old do you think they are? Froggy asked. Queen Snow White and King Charming have only been married a few years. Queen Cinderella and King Charming are expecting their first child soon, and Queen Sleeping Beauty and King Charming are sadly trying to restore their kingdom to consciousness after that horrible sleeping spell it was placed under. Wait, Connor said, are you saying all these queens are married to the same guy? Certainly not, Froggy said. There are 3 King Charmings, they're brothers. Of course, Alex said. Snow White, Cinderella, and Sleeping Beauty are all married to Prince Charming. There's more than one. Oh, how come I never thought about that? Connor's eyes were fixated on the map. He kept searching for some kind of road or bridge that would lead them back home, but he found nothing. Why are there a bunch of rocks around the troll and goblin territory? Connor asked. As punishment, Froggy said. Trolls and goblins are nasty creatures. They have a habit of kidnapping people and turning them into slaves. The Fairy Council forced the trolls and goblins into one territory, and none of them are allowed to leave without permission. Fairy Council? Alex asked. This world was almost too good to be true. Yes, there's a group of the most powerful fairies in the kingdom, Froggy exclaimed. Cinderella's fairy godmother is one of them, so is Mother Goose, and all the fairies that blessed Sleeping Beauty when she was a baby. They're on it too. They rule the fairy kingdom, and they are the leaders of the Happy Ever After Assembly. Is the Red Riding Hood kingdom under some sort of punishment too? Connor asked. Why is there a huge wall built around it? Alex looked down at the map and back at Froggy, equally curious. That was the result of the Crawl Revolution, C-R-A-W-L, Froggy said. What was the Crawl Revolution? Alex asked. The citizens' riots against wolf liberty, Froggy exclaimed. The Red Riding Hood Kingdom used to be a group of villages in the Northern Kingdom that were constantly under attack by wolves. They begged the evil queen, Snow White's stepmother, who was on the throne at the time, to help them. But the evil queen was too occupied with her vanity, so they revolted and started their own kingdom. They built a huge wall around it so no wolves could get in. And now Red Riding Hood is the queen? Alex asked. Yes, she's the only elected queen in history, Froggy said. The villagers figured her story was the most symbolic of their struggles, so they chose her to lead them. But isn't she just a little girl? Alex asked. No, she's a very young woman now, very self-obsessed young woman, from what I hear. After all, she named the kingdom after herself. Her grandmother does most of the decision-making, while she takes all the credit, Froggy said. Unfortunately, the Crawl Revolution only led to the rise of the big bad wolf pack. The big bad wolf pack? Connor asked. Yes, they're descendants of the original big bad wolf. They traveled around terrorizing villages and attacking unsuspecting travelers, Froggy said. Oh, joy, Connor said sarcastically. I'm sorry I asked. But besides that, things are very peaceful throughout the kingdom, Froggy said. His voice drifted off, and uncertainty grew on his face. That was, until a week ago. The twins leaned forward. What happened a week ago? Alex asked. Blah. The evil queen escaped from the dungeons of Snow White's palace, Froggy told them. I thought everyone had heard. Okay, so wait a minute. Remember in the prologue when we read, and the evil queen, she was in the dungeon, all those to get to her, and guards and all of that kind of stuff, and Snow White goes, and she's like, oh, why were you mean to me when we were blah, blah, blah. She was still in the dungeon. So now, here we are, and they're now in this other special time where it must be right after that because she has just recently in the last week escaped. Oh my goodness. Well, this is news to us, Connor said. This can't be good. How'd she escape? Alex asked. No one knows, Froggy said. She just vanished along with her magic mirror. Snow White's army has been searching throughout all of the kingdoms for her. They passed through these woods at least twice a day. So far, they found nothing, not even a footprint, to lead them to her direction. Do you think they're going to find her? Connor asked. Oh, I do hope so, Froggy said. She's a very dangerous woman. She's only the queen in history to lose her throne. I couldn't imagine the revenge she must be seeking. Who knows what she's planning to do next? Alex suddenly became very tense. It just occurred to her that along with all the characters she had grown up loving, all the ones she hated and feared actually existed too. It made her feel very uneasy and very unsafe. The fire in the fireplace began to fade, and Froggy got up and added another log. The twins' eyes and mouths were very wide open, and their heads were spinning from all this new information. Exactly how far away from here do you live? Froggy asked as he sat back down across from them. The twins looked at each other, back at Froggy, and then back at each other. They didn't know what to tell him. Would he believe them if they told him the truth? It's practically a different world, Connor said. Alex shot him a dirty look and then nervously laughed, trying to make light of what her brother just said. Froggy wasn't laughing. He sat straight up in his seat, and his face grew very still, with an intensity in his eyes, as if he had found the solution to a mystery. Interesting, Froggy said, eyeing the twins back and forth. Because if I didn't know better, just from the way you dress and the way you speak and the way you are so surprised by the basic history, I would say that there is a very good chance you are indeed from another world. They didn't understand what he was trying to say. Did he know something that he didn't? Just out of curiosity, have you ever heard of another world? Alex asked him. Or preferably, how to get back to it? Connor added. Froggy studied their faces even more intently for a moment. He got up again and went to a bookshelf on the far side of the room. He rustled through books, looked for something of special interest, and then finally he found it, a small leather-bound journal with a red band around it. Have either of you ever heard of the wishing spell? Froggy asked the twins. Alex and Connor shook their heads. Froggy flipped through the pages of the journal. I assume not, he said. It's a legendary spell. Compromises a list of items, and apparently when you put all of these items together, you are granted one wish. Doesn't matter how extravagant the wish is, the wishing spell will grant it. Many people believe it's only a myth, and I did too, until I found this journal. What does that journal have to do with anything? Connor asked. It was written by a man from the Charming Kingdom, Froggy said. He managed to discover what these items were, and he recorded them in his journal to find them. His one wish was to reunite with the woman he loved, and in the journal he claimed she lived in another world. Alex and Connor sat straight up. They were sitting on the edges of their seats without realizing it. I thought the man was writing a journal. He was crazy. I didn't believe another world could exist until I began finding your books, Alex. And then when I saw your bickering in the forest, I knew you two were different, Froggy said. I knew you had to be from a place that the man had written about. The twins were happy the truth was out. Froggy seemed genuinely excited about the whole thing. Did he make it? Alex asked. Did the man cross over into the world again? He must have, Froggy said. The journal ends when he found the last item. Froggy handed the twins the journal, and he took a seat in his chair. Wherever you're from, it's home that you wish to go back to. I think your best chance is by following this journal. The twins went silent for a moment. They stared down at the journal in his hands with immense hope. What items does the spell require? Asked Alex. All sorts from all over, Froggy told her, but the journal gives great instructions on where and how to find them. Some of them are very dangerous to get. Of course they are, Connor said. Typical. If the spell will grant whatever wish you want, why didn't you search for the items and wish to be human again? Alex asked Froggy. Froggy thought about this for a moment. It was a question he had asked himself many times, and he was ashamed of the answer. I've kept the journal all these years in case I ever decided to, Froggy exclaimed with difficulty, but searching for the items would mean I'd have to face the world looking like this, and frankly, children, that's something I'm not ready to do. It's something I don't think I'll ever be ready to do. He spoke from a place of deep sadness. Clearly, he wasn't finished learning the witch's lessons yet. It's getting late, Froggy said. Why don't you sleep in and decide what you want to do in the morning? You're welcome to stay here as long as you like. Thank you, Alex said. I hope we aren't a bother. Oh, no bother at all. Froggy smiled earnestly. Froggy got them a large blanket to share. He blew out all the lamps and put out the fire in the fireplace. Alex and Connor tossed and turned with thoughts of the wishing spell at night, but there was no decision to make. If the journal offered a possible way home, they would have to do anything and everything it had instructed them to do. They had no choice. They were about to embark on the greatest scavenger hunt of their lives. Dun, dun, dun. End of chapter 5. I'll see you all soon for chapter 6.